The first consistency that we are going to discuss is stiff consistency royal icing. Now, this consistency is usually used to make flowers, to add decorations, to outline, and sometimes to even write on your cookies, and is usually the same consistency that comes out when your icing is freshly made. If this is your first time decorating sugar cookies, I highly recommend using these types of bags accompanied by couplers. So what this is going to do is it's going to actually allow you to change the tips, the tip size, or the tip design while still using the same bag of icing. This way you can experiment with different techniques or the different royal icing consistencies without having to use too many bags. Another great thing to have in handy is to always have a glass so that you are able to place your bag over it and you are able to easily scoop in your royal icing. As with any type of icing, it's very important to take out any air bubbles, and it's also important to push down all of the icing as close to the tip as possible. I like to use a flat bench scraper. You can definitely use your fingers or anything else that is handy so that you can achieve this. And to close my bags, I simply just wrap all the way to the top and fold down the middle while clipping this with an office clip, or you can also use bag ties. As a way to practice any new design, I always like to have these little plastic boards with me. These are from the brand Wilton, and I always have a few of these in hand. And what I recommend is placing at the bottom either a script or a character, something that you want to practice, and simply outlining it. And here I'm going to show you how the stiff consistency royal icing writes, and as you can see, it's going to hold its shape very well without blending or melding into the rest of the lines that I'm going to draw out for you. It's always a good idea to have a scribe on hand, especially if you have little points at the end of lettering or at the end of a frame or an outline that you are doing. As you can see here, you're going to be able to witness that the straight line and the wiggly line that we make will hold their shape, and that's why this consistency is preferred to outline, to also outline any script, or to make decorations such as flowers or leaves for your cookies. Next, let's discuss medium consistency royal icing. This consistency is typically used to flood cookies or also to fill in outlined text. For example, when you outline with stiff consistency, you can definitely go back and then flood in the remaining of the text using this same consistency. Now, as a personal preference, whenever I decorate my cookies, as far as outlining and flooding, I like to use the exact same consistency for both. So when I prepare my colors, I always prepare all of them in medium consistency, and I outline and flood with the exact same consistency. It just seems to be easier for me, and I feel that the medium consistency for me works very well. A good way to tell if you've reached medium consistency is when your icing starts to form a little bit of a ribbon when you pick it up from the spatula. Another way that I like to test is by simply using a scribe on one of the ribbons and simply just kind of wiggling it around to see if all the bumps and lumps disappear. Then this is basically the test that I do to make sure that I've reached medium consistency. Now I'm going to go ahead and use the exact same bag. What I simply did is I only took out the tip. I went ahead and washed it and rinsed it, because if you are using the same bag as you are when practicing, you have to make sure to take out any of the old or remaining consistency that you were using prior, so that the new consistency doesn't get stuck when you are trying to pipe it out. As you'll be able to see here, medium consistency royal icing is not very good for writing. So basically what happens is, although it's still stiff enough but also soft enough, it's not stiff enough to hold its shape. So for example, let's say that you have lettering that has too many loops or that is very close together. Eventually what is going to happen is that it's going to start to melt all into one same word or one same letter. You'll be able to see the difference here when I do the wiggly line. Let's discuss soft consistency royal icing. This consistency is usually used when you are wanting to dip cookies, or it's also used by some people to flood their outlined cookies. I personally prefer to use this consistency only when dipping my cookies because I feel that it's too thin for me to be able to pipe and flood with confidence. Sometimes what happens is that if there's too many bubbles in your royal icing, you have the risk, or you run the risk, of getting craters when your icing dries, which is why I opt for using the medium consistency royal icing versus flooding with this thin or soft consistency. Good way of knowing that you've reached soft or thin consistency royal icing is that when you pick up your icing with your spatula, it will take approximately 7 to 8 seconds to blend back into one huge blob. You'll be able to see it here in just a little bit when I zoom in. This consistency can also be compared to school glue. You know, just like when you open a bottle of school glue and you pour it onto a paper or a surface, that's the consistency that you are looking for when you are wanting to make thin or soft consistency royal icing. As before, we are using the same bag of royal icing, but what I'm doing this time is I'm actually changing the size of the piping tip. So the size that I'm choosing is actually used for more of a flooding type tip or for just bigger details. So what you're going to see here is that I'm going to attempt to write with this consistency, but you can definitely use this tip to also flood your cookies. And as you see here, you know that you've reached soft or thin consistency when it starts oozing out of your bag. Once I'm done writing this word, you're going to be able to see that there's barely any separation between the lettering. So as I mentioned in the beginning, this consistency is best for dipping or for flooding your cookies, but definitely not for writing. You'll be able to see exactly what I'm talking about when we do the line and the squiggly at the bottom. We have now reviewed the 3 main consistencies of royal icing. As you can probably tell, there may be a lot of different consistencies in between the 3 that I mentioned, but as you practice and as you feel more comfortable, you'll find what feels best for you when holding the piping bag. Definitely give all of these a try, and don't forget that before practicing on an actual cookie, you can definitely practice on these plastic boards, or you can also have practice cookies, and when you're done practicing with them, simply scrape off the icing that you no longer want to use and start all over again.